When I moved into the house by the river, I didn't expect to feel watched. The place was old, gray from salt and rain, with iron pipes that thumped in the walls and a yard full of damp leaves. It sat near a wharf where nothing docked anymore, except for a rusted-out cargo ship that looked like it hadn't moved in decades. They called it Ariadne. I never saw anyone working on it. No lights, no maintenance crews, just silence and decay. The strange thing was the nights. Not loud, but not quiet either. Some kind of sound carried across the water, faint, like the breath of something sleeping with its mouth open. Sometimes it would wake me up with a jolt, though I couldn't explain why it was frightening. It wasn't even a clear noise, just presence. I told myself it was natural. Water plays tricks with sound. But it didn't stop. I'd find myself standing at the window in the dark, straining to see the shape of the ship beyond the dock lights, wondering why it felt like it was looking back. One morning, after a particularly restless night, I walked down to the pier. I didn't really know why. The fog was low, brushing the ground, and the air felt colder than it should have. Up close, Ariadne looked even worse, its hull streaked with moss, the railing bent inwards like something had crushed it from above. The windows were broken, and someone had painted over the ship's name in black. I crossed onto it. The deck dipped slightly under my weight, which I expected, but it didn't feel like rust or water damage. It felt occupied, not by anyone visible, just a sense that the ship had never been fully emptied. Inside, the light fell through shattered panels and thin gray sheets. There were gloves on a hook by the door, stiff with age, a plate on the table, clean, a cup turned upside down over a spoon. Nothing fresh, just untouched, preserved. Farther back, near the engine compartment, I found a small room with a narrow desk and a drawer that had been forced open long ago. Among the scattered papers was a notebook. Half its pages were missing, but the ones that remained had thin, tidy handwriting. Each page looked the same, just brief entries describing things like fog, wind direction, and oddly phrases about someone keeping lookout or resuming post. Some of them had dates. Most didn't. One entry near the end was different. A short note with nothing above or below it. He came aboard today. He thinks he chose to. I closed the book, slid it back under the pile, and left without touching anything else. I didn't look back as I walked home, but something followed me anyway. Not footsteps, not sound, just the certainty that whatever the ship had been waiting for might not be tied to the ship at all. It might have just needed someone nearby, someone who wouldn't leave. Things didn't return to normal after that. Not really. I stopped sleeping through the night. Not from fear exactly. It was something quieter than that. Like the edges of my mind had become alert to something just outside my understanding. I'd wake up in the dark, not knowing why, and stay frozen under the blanket, listening. The sounds from the wharf changed. They weren't louder, just sharper. The groan of metal under stress. A soft, repeated knock, like someone tapping a pipe rhythmically. Sometimes I'd think it had stopped, only to realize it had blended into the silence, like it was inside the walls. I began noticing small things in the house, not dramatic, just off. The window in the bathroom would be cracked open, though I was sure I hadn't touched it. One night, the front door was unlatched, not open, but no longer locked. The wind could have done it. I kept telling myself that. Then the lights. They didn't flicker, they dimmed. Not all at once. Just one bulb in the hallway, then a lamp in the corner, as if something were passing between them, slowly dulling the electricity. I told myself to stay rational. I even unplugged things, checked the fuses. Nothing wrong. The electrician found nothing either. He asked how long I'd lived here. I didn't answer. Some mornings the floorboards felt warm. Just one or two near the kitchen. Always the same ones. Like someone had stood there for hours while I slept. I began keeping the curtains closed. I couldn't bear seeing the dock in the moonlight. That old ship sitting out there, still, half swallowed by mist, yet always present like a held breath. I couldn't see movement on it, but I knew I was being watched from it. Not constantly, not obviously. Just now and then, when my eyes met that exact point where the windows of the bridge used to be, the notebook haunted me. I hadn't taken it, hadn't even touched it after the first time, but I remembered the handwriting. Thin, precise, like someone trying to stay calm while writing during a storm. He thinks he chose to. It kept repeating in my head. That one line. It didn't sound like fear. It sounded like resignation. I started keeping notes, too. Nothing detailed. Just impressions. Woke up again. Hallway colder than usual. Something wet on the porch, not rain. I never showed them to anyone. I didn't know how to explain what I was even recording. Then, one morning, I stepped outside and saw the prints. Not shoes. Not bare feet. Just impressions in the dirt, round as if something heavy had pressed down in a slow, deliberate path from the dock to my door. They didn't lead away. The prints vanished after a day, swallowed by wind and dew. I tried to take a photo, but the image came out blank, just dark soil and shadow. Nothing strange to anyone else, but I'd seen them, felt them. From that point on, it wasn't just the house that felt wrong. It was me. I couldn't remember what I'd done the day before. Not clearly. I'd go to the store and forget what I'd bought. I'd sit at my desk and realize the sun had shifted twice without me moving. The lights in the hallway stayed dim. One night they clicked off, not burned out, just off. No sound, and the switch didn't respond. The electrician never came back. He never returned my messages. That week I woke to the sound of the door opening. Not breaking, not forced. Just the soft mechanical click of a lock giving way. But when I ran to check, the door was shut, locked, no signs of entry, nothing taken. Only the chair by the window had moved, turned to face the dock. It wasn't fear anymore. It was understanding. Something had chosen me, not violently, not with urgency, just patiently. It waited. It didn't need to break in. It needed me to watch long enough, to change. I stopped turning the lights on at night. I stopped checking the locks. There was no point. The house wasn't being entered. It was being inhabited by something slow, heavy, and deeply aware. Sometimes I catch myself standing in the same spot on the porch for minutes at a time, staring toward the fog over the water. I don't know what I'm waiting for, or maybe I do. Maybe I always did. The old ship is gone now. One morning I looked and it wasn't there. No sounds, no ripples in the water. Just vanished like it had never been. But I still leave the chair by the window, still angled toward the dock, and sometimes when the sky turns black and the air smells like rust, I think I see a shape in the water, something vast and low just under the surface, watching, There's no fear now, only the sense that I've taken someone else's place. And the watch continues. The barge had been moored on the outskirts of town for over a decade, half sunk in mud and forgotten by anyone who didn't grow up near the river. Locals called it the Floater Hotel, though no one remembered its real name. It had been stripped of anything valuable years ago, pipes, furniture, even door handles, and left to rot on the water like an abandoned lung. But to Dylan, it was perfect. He ran a modest YouTube channel built on urban exploration and light horror bait. Nothing too extreme, just enough to keep the algorithm happy. Derelict schools, collapsed diners, locked tunnels. But this was different. The hotel barge had an aura about it. No one dared approach it anymore, not even the teenagers who came down to drink by the docks. Dylan couldn't find a single decent walkthrough video of the interior. That meant one thing: fresh views. He arrived just before dusk, hauling a backpack with camera gear, a sleeping bag, and a GoPro strapped to his chest. The walkway connecting the barge to the shore had mostly rotted through, but a wide steel pipe ran parallel to it, and he balanced across it with shaky knees and pounding excitement. The door had been torn off years ago. Inside, the air was thick and sour, like mildew wrapped in copper. Dust danced in the dying light, and the narrow hallway tilted just enough to disorient. He spent the first 2 hours filming the upper and lower decks. His voiceover was casual, more amused than spooked, as he walked through empty rooms with sagging ceilings and graffiti that looked like it had been drawn by ghosts. The top floor had mostly collapsed, and the second had nothing but water-damaged carpets and broken light fixtures. But the third deck, the one below the waterline, was intact. The hallway there was narrower, darker, humid. Doors lined both sides like teeth. That's where he ended his footage for the night, jokingly saying he'd come back down after midnight to see what floats in the dark. He set up camp on the second deck in a relatively dry room. Plywood over the windows, some mold on the mattress, but stable enough. He ate jerky, checked the footage on his laptop, and set the GoPro to record a time-lapse facing the hallway outside. The night passed in patches of shallow sleep. Creaks came from inside the walls. Metal groaned under the shifting current. He told himself it was nothing, just a ship decomposing in real time. Around 3:40 a.m., he woke up suddenly, heart racing for no clear reason. Everything was quiet. Not peaceful dead quiet. The kind of silence that seemed to press against his ears from the inside. He stayed still until sleep dragged him back down. In the morning, the barge looked different. Still gray, still slumped in the water, but something in the air felt wrong. Dylan couldn't put his finger on it. The GoPro had filled its memory card. He packed up, crossed the pipe again, and headed home. It wasn't until 2 days later, while editing the footage, that he noticed the silhouette. At first he thought it was a trick of light, some reflection or shadow distortion, but it was too defined. On the third deck, during the walkthrough, just before he panned away from an open door, something was standing at the edge of the frame. A figure, motionless, watching. Dylan scrubbed back and forth through the footage, frame by frame. It didn't move. It didn't waver. But it was there, tall, slender, just watching. He'd been alone on that floor. He was sure of it. His voice didn't even hesitate in the recording. He hadn't seen anything then. He checked the other clips, especially the overnight hallway footage. At 3:42 a.m., the frame stuttered, then flickered, and for 10 seconds the silhouette appeared again at the far end of the corridor. Then, frame by frame, it stepped closer. Not walking, just repositioned, closer each time. And at the last frame before the camera cut out, it stood directly in front of the lens. There was no sound, just blackness. He checked the GoPro. The files ended at 3:52 amen, but he had woken up at 3:40. Dylan froze. He hadn't turned the camera off, and in that last frame, just before the footage ends, there was something else. A brief reflection in the glass behind the figure, his sleeping body on the bed, and the figure standing inside the room. But Dylan didn't remember opening the door. Dylan didn't finish the edit. He closed the file and stepped away from the laptop, heart pounding hard in his throat. He hadn't imagined that figure. The frames were clean, detailed. It wasn't some blurry trick of light or motion, and he had no memory of waking up again after 3:40, no memory of anyone opening the door, and certainly no memory of someone or something standing over him. He left the footage untouched for 3 days, but the thought festered. When he tried to sleep, he imagined footsteps creaking outside his bedroom door. When he showered, he caught shapes in the steamed mirror. Always tall, always still, watching. Eventually, curiosity won over fear. He reopened the footage and zoomed in on the figure. The shape wasn't just standing, it was leaning slightly forward, like it had been listening. Its features weren't clear, but something in the outline of the head and shoulders looked wrong, elongated, angular, almost like it wasn't built for standing upright. And the reflection, he froze it, enhanced the exposure. There it was, Dylan lying in bed, the shape standing inside the room. But the door still closed. That same night, he noticed something strange about the GoPro itself. He hadn't touched it since returning home, but now when he picked it up, the battery was full. That shouldn't have been possible. The camera had drained completely during the shoot. Then he checked the internal clock. It was exactly 3 minutes behind real time. Not a big deal, but the timestamp on the final frame of hallway footage read 3 hours 52 minutes and 4 seconds, A.M. He had woken up at 3:40 a.m., meaning that final shot with the figure at the foot of the bed was taken while he was awake. He tried to convince himself it was all a mistake, a software glitch, a trick of light. Maybe someone had followed him onto the barge. Maybe it was a squatter or some sick prank. But none of that explained what happened next, because that night the sound came back. At first it was faint, a low metallic creak, like a pressure change deep inside old pipes. But there were no pipes in his room. Then came the tapping, not on glass or wood, on fabric, like a finger brushing across a blanket. He lay frozen in the dark, every muscle locked. The air had changed thicker now, damp like the inside of that rotting barge. The smell hit him next, mildew and rust, the scent of deep, stagnant water. At 3:42 a.m., he finally sat up. There was nothing in the room, no movement, no shadow, no silhouette. But the smell was still there. He turned on every light and didn't sleep again that night, or the next. By the third night, his nerves were fraying. He disconnected all his cameras, deleted the footage, and forced himself to stop thinking about it. Sleep returned slowly with the help of medication and a white noise app. He didn't believe in ghosts or monsters, or anything that couldn't be explained by stress and suggestion. But something had changed in his apartment. No matter how many times he aired out the room, the mildew smell came back, always around 3:40 a.m. Just a trace, just enough to notice. The dreams, too, became frequent. Short loops of the barge corridor, the sound of water trickling up walls, and a low voice whispering numbers. Sometimes he'd wake up sitting up, heart racing, sheets damp, unsure how much time had passed. Then, about a week later, the post arrived. There was no return address, just a small white padded envelope. Inside was a USB stick, and a photo printed on thick matte paper. Grainy, high contrast, black and white. He knew the image immediately. It was the hallway of the barge, third deck, the same stretch he'd walked. Same warped floorboards, same wallpaper peeling in strips. But in this photo, the figure was front and center, and it wasn't a silhouette anymore. It had a face now, and the face was his. Dylan didn't plug in the USB. He kept telling himself it was just a prank. Someone must have found the footage online. Maybe an old crew member. Maybe one of those urban explorer types who dig through abandoned places and leave behind cryptic nonsense. But deep down, he knew better. The image in the photo wasn't a trick. It wasn't a morph or a artifact. It was him. Same jawline. Same faint scar above the right brow. Same dull, tired eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Only wrong. Like the face had forgotten how to be a face. It was close, but not practiced. Like something had watched him for too long and tried to wear him. That night, the hallway light turned on by itself. He lived alone. Motion sensor bulb. One of those energy-saving upgrades he never gave a second thought to. But at 3:44 a.m., while lying still in bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft amber glow crept under his door. He sat up slowly. The air had that thick, wet feel again, like breath on the back of his neck. He opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty. But at the far end, on the wall above the fuse box, something had been written in wet soot. "You came back first." He didn't remember writing that. But somehow his hand smelled of iron and ash. Dylan stopped leaving the apartment. The edits piled up, unanswered emails flooded his inbox, and time began to blur. Each night, the hallway light turned on between 3:40 and 3:50. He stopped looking, but the smell always arrived with it, mold and river silt. Sometimes the tap in the bathroom would click twice, as if someone testing the pipes. Other nights he would wake up facing the wrong direction. Not diagonally, flipped, head where his feet had been, like he'd been rotated with care. And every morning the mirror would fog just a little despite no hot water use, always with the same faint outline. A handprint, thin fingers, too long. It all changed again the day he received the second envelope. This time there was no USB, just a Polaroid, freshly developed, and not of the barge. It was his apartment, his bedroom, shot from the foot of the bed, from the exact same angle as that final GoPro frame. He was asleep in the image, on his side, face slack, mouth slightly open. And in the mirror on the wall behind the bed, another version of him stood watching. Taller, narrower, bent forward slightly, like it hadn't yet decided what to do with the body it had copied. That night, Dylan left the apartment. Not permanently, just for a few hours, to breathe, to think, to get away from the air that no longer felt like his. He walked until dawn, barely remembering the turns he took. When he came back, the front door was unlocked. Inside, nothing looked touched, except that the GoPro. It sat on his desk, fully charged, the lens facing the bed. And when he checked the footage, there was only one clip. It started at 3:41 a.m. No movement. No sound, just you and sleeping. And from the corner of the room, something slowly leaned into frame, like it had always been there, like it had simply forgotten to leave. It wore his face again, but this time it smiled and whispered something, too quiet to hear. But when Dylan watched it again and again and again, he started mouthing the words along with it, because he already knew them